Welcome to Veterans Voices. I'm Jayla Washington. In the next half hour, we will highlight stories of veterans here in Central Texas and all around the country. We'll take you to the University of Texas to take a closer look at a critical time in the Vietnam War. See how an immersive museum exhibit highlights what happened on the battlefield and on the home front. Plus, telling stories through music. We'll explore a program that's helping veterans express themselves on stage and saving lives in the process. And we'll hit the links for a round of military-themed miniature golf. Meet the veteran who inspired a tribute that's teaching future generations about our nation's history. We start with the story of one oral history program that's captured hundreds of stories. The Texas General Land Office has been sitting down with veterans for decades now, documenting their life experiences serving our country. Here's how veterans' voices are being honored not just today, but always.
Today is June 19th, 2024, and today I'm going to be interviewing Miss Laura Kerner. This interview is being conducted via telephone.
When Lieutenant Laura Kerner was asked to share her story of service with the U.S. Navy, she was surprised.
I was like, okay, well, why not? Why wouldn't I share my story?
It starts when she was a tender 17 years old and decided to go to the United States Naval Academy, though she had never been to the ocean before. But she just knew she wanted to serve her country.
Thinking back, I don't even think I've told my whole story to my own daughters about what I did in the military.
As times changed, as did laws, Kerner was one of the first women allowed to serve in combat and was a female trailblazer on destroyers and an aircraft carrier.
Sitting there and laying it all out, I didn't realize all the things that I had been involved in and all the things I had done and why it was important to share. Sitting back and reflecting, you realize, wow, I was really there during an extremely pivotal time in the military.
It's these reflections and realizations that are at the heart of why the Texas General Land Commission began its Voices of Veterans oral history program.
So many of our veterans, when they came home, they didn't tell their stories.
The General Land Office connects with veterans in various ways, like through its nursing homes and mortgage programs.
We actually have a veteran who does the interview.
Any incidents ever happened while you were out at sea?
Over the course of about an hour, a veteran's upbringing, what led them to serve, funny moments.
I fell off my sailboat, and that was the first time I ever touched salt water.
But also tragedy.
As we think there's just so much value in the rich lives that they led, family is sometimes shocked by what they hear.
Kerner's story now, amongst more than 500 shared and forever archived.
I always felt like I was doing something of purpose.
You can find a full archive of these stories on the Voices of Veterans webpage. They list them in alphabetical order, and veterans can also reach out to share their own stories. We have links on our webpage. Just look for the Veterans Voices section on KXAN.com. And now we go from talking about veterans' stories to singing them as a form of post-conflict care. Soldier Songs and Voices creates a safe space for vets to unleash their creativity and express themselves through music. The local nonprofit has expanded to chapters all across the country, and demand has grown so quickly it is looking to create more chapters. KXAN's Jennifer Sanders explains how it is transforming lives one note at a time.
As the sun begins to set in Lockhart, Texas, you can hear the faint sound of music permeating through the downtown historic district, just off the main square. It's coming from the back patio of Lodoff Fanny's. Every month, you'll find a group of veterans like retired Army Major Deb Westlow in an intimate circle, sharing their stories through songs they created.
And it's called "You Can Go," and that's kind of been my mantra ever since.
You Can Go, a song that chronicles the darkest moments of her journey.
It was life-changing. I mean, here I'm thinking I'm healthy, I go along, and all of a sudden, bam, there's one cancer, and then bam, another one, and spent a lot of time in treatments for the various cancers.
Cancer, not once, not twice, but 3 times. Blood, breast, and skin.
Had a detrimental impact on my life. So when this organization came along, it kind of opened up my world.
One line of the song says, when you get the news, you think it's the end, but your new normal is about to begin. Over the last 5.5 years, Soldier Songs and Voices has helped her navigate that new normal.
They're like my best friends. We're strangers when we first first met, but now we share so much of our lives with these other veterans. It's very therapeutic. The whole idea of putting your thoughts down on paper and then eventually putting it into a song is such a therapeutic experience.
Musician Dustin Welch started the nonprofit in 2011. After his performances, veterans would tell him how they wanted to learn how to play the guitar or even write songs. So he started small monthly or weekly casual workshops like these that grew into 17 chapters across the country.
People with speech aphasia and a lot of neurological things, chronic seizures. People were getting off their meds. Just immediately, they were like, I don't know what you're up to. So at that point, I realized, oh, we're actually onto something.
He didn't realize the transformative path it would create.
I was going to commit suicide in 2007. Literally, I took the gun out of my mouth the day Dustin Welch saved my life. Trying to teach me how to get those emotions on paper. I'm a product of the effort that they constantly pour into us veterans out here.
It's being able to put yourself out there, being able to trust that you can open up and show yourself to other people. That is a huge protective factor. It reduces a risk for suicide, but also for depression and anxiety and isolation.
Dr. Blake Harris with the Texas Veterans Commission says shared safe spaces like these help build confidence and organize feelings from the past and the present.
It helps us access our memories, gives us context to them, and helps us really identify how we're feeling with them. But it also, when you're activating all parts of your brain, it helps energize us as well.
The type of energy that's palpable among Deb Westlow and this group of veterans.
It's been my therapy for years, and I've seen so many others that, PTSD or other challenges that veterans face, how it's just changed their life, just like it's changed mine.
In Lockhart, Jennifer Sanders, KXAN News.
What an incredibly powerful story. And we have more stories for you on this special presentation of Veterans Voices, including how a mini golf course is educating the next generation on the story of the Second World War.
Their mission was deception, and to carry it out, they used inflatable tanks and sound effects and illusion, impersonation, right on the battlefields of Europe.
And how an army of ghosts helped save lives and turn the war in the Allies' favor. As well as how a new exhibit is shedding light on the Vietnam War and how those back home caught a first glimpse of the fighting. Welcome back to Veterans Voices. I'm Jayla Washington. Our next story takes us to the University of Texas campus and an exhibit that aims to give new insight into the Vietnam War. It's at the LBJ Presidential Library, home of millions of pages of historical documents. This exhibit focuses on a pivotal period in time, evoking emotions and the human side of the war.
Another standoff may be coming in the big battles expected south of the demilitarized zone.
From powerful historical digital files like this editorial from Walter Cronkite in 1968.
The bloody experience of Vietnam is to end in a stalemate.
To oral histories from veterans.
Nobody came up to me and said, welcome back, except for my parents.
And walls filled with captivating photos of soldiers. Ain't no daylight in Vietnam. That's the name of this new exhibit at the LBJ Library. Those walking through captivated, moved, and transported back to a pivotal time in American history.
Sitting in that seat and watching that television like that, it felt like I was in the moment like back then.
Centered around the month of March 1968, when scarring images and clips reached homes, sparking a turning point in the war. It's an experience affecting some more than others.
I'm Vietnamese, actually. Yes.
For David Jang, it's more personal.
My biological grandfather was part of this war. Viewing all of this really is an emotional thing for me.
This last big gasp before negotiation.
The exhibit starts here in what looks and feels like a living room from the 60s, watching Walter Cronkite on an old TV.
We hope is that it gives the feeling of what it would have been like to be in this space, in this time, as this is unfolding.
From there, a step into Vietnam.
Much like young soldiers would have going from their living rooms and into the war. It highlights this soldier's experience and the perspectives of those who were on the ground in Vietnam during this pivotal time.
The Lyndon B. Johnson Library, home to this exhibit, is significant, as it's a part of Johnson's presidential administration's legacy, a war that triggered criticism and divide, many lives on the line.
You find yourself back in a living room on March 31st of 1968 as Lyndon Johnson announces that he won't be running in the election that year. We thought it was important to look at the human side of the war as opposed to the administrative side. We thought it was time to let veterans speak for themselves and to give them voice.
A voice that leads to conversations and reflections. Remembering, honoring, and never forgetting. That's the hope.
It's what I expected and more, to be honest. I didn't think it'd be this in-depth.
Outside the exhibit, visitors can see a granite panel with the names of service members killed or missing in just 1 week of March 1968. The panel was originally meant for the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, but it had a small imperfection, so a replacement panel was then created. It is now part of the LBJ's library's permanent collection. Coming up on Veterans Voices, a local business telling the story of those who served through mini golf.
There are holes that we call like dedication holes to women who were serving in another capacity, not necessarily on the front lines. At the Flying Tigers, Tuskegee Airmen.
How a memorial mini golf course tells the tale of World War II. And later, how an army made up of paper, plastic, and ghosts helped lead the Allies to victory in France. Welcome back to Veterans Voices. We're looking at a place that's honoring veterans, but with an interactive twist. A memorial miniature golf course takes its visitors through a course of time and critical history that has shaped our country. With every tap, know there's a deeper story.
My grandfather grew up listening to his stories, just became this like guy that everybody leaned on. 28 years in the Air Force.
Inspired tenderly by Brian McKinney's grandfather and other veterans alike, 3 years ago, McKinney decided to honor those who have given so much to our country in a way like never before.
So it's 18 holes. It's actually one of the top 5 longest courses in the country. It's over 700 yards of turf.
And it's an interactive journey through the critical moments of World War II. In chronological order with an education placard at each one that allow you to reflect while you play.
But there are holes that we call like dedication holes to women who were serving in another capacity, not necessarily on the front lines. At the Flying Tigers, Tuskegee Airmen.
Each hole honors a veteran. Right next to the course, a museum with authentic mementos from the war.
Is all of Huey's flight gear, his helmet, his goggles, his oxygen mask.
And there is one very special veteran in Central Texas who has been a critical tie to the past and present.
Huey H. Lamb, Jr.
And how young are you, sir?
I'm young as 100.
He's one of the few remaining World War II veterans still living.
Yes.
He's a retired Lieutenant Colonel fighter pilot who McKinney found out was a part of the same unit as his grandfather not too long ago. And since that revelation, Huey has been like family and has even donated some of his keepsakes to Brian in the museum, like this pilot fighter suit. And it's been a while, but he's played a few holes on the course himself. I bet you were quite the competitor.
Right.
A few years ago when you were out there.
Right.
A course that's designed to grow in size and in unique pieces added. This replica of one of the World War II planes Huey flew, now on a playground for kids on site, is one of his favorite things.
Just about every detail is correct. The painting, the checkerboard nose. And
the true impact, though, is knowing his sacrifice and so many others still remembered today.
The losses were so great.
Well, Huey Lamb flew 61 combat missions during World War II, and he's credited with shooting down 2.5 aircraft. Lamb actually named his fighter plane after his little sister, Etta Jean. You can see that plane there. You may have noticed her name painted on the replica plane that we showed you in our story. Huey was discharged in 1945, but remained in the Air Force Reserves for nearly 30 years. He earned a business degree from the University of Texas in 1950 and later went on to open a car business. Well, starting your own business can be difficult, even more so if you are a veteran who has just come back from overseas. Mary Jane Beleza has more on how one Las Vegas man is helping vets get their businesses off the ground.
Marine Corps veteran and Vets in Tech founder Dave Berlin has spent several years helping veterans with startup companies. It's a grind he knows all too well, helping others overcome unique struggles in Las Vegas.
But a lot of times it really does help to have other people around us, especially if we're starting and growing businesses. Entrepreneurship can be a very lonely road, and with having people around and just knowing that we do have a space to go to, one, it removes that loneliness, but two, you never know who you're going to meet.
Berlin teamed up with Nevada Partners to create the Veterans Entrepreneurial Library, a co-working area for veterans, providing a podcast studio, books, and collaboration.
I've always been very passionate, and I've continued to serve veteran programs. I helped bring a program called Bunker Labs here to Las Vegas. We help veterans start and grow businesses.
It's a hidden gem. The Veterans Entrepreneurial Library is located here at the historic West Side. It's inside the Nevada Partners Community Learning Center, bringing services to veterans in every part of the valley.
We really appreciate the great service that veterans have contributed here in Nevada, and that's why we wanted to create a safe space for veterans to come and contribute their talents into our space, connect and mentor youth.
Elias Benjaloun, entrepreneur resident at Nevada Partners, says the local hub is not just for veterans, but for everyone.
One of our top priorities here at Nevada Partners is serving underserved communities.
With community support, resources, and networking options, Berlin says any veteran can be a business owner.
One thing that is true is that we all are used to being part of a unit and being part of a group. So anytime we can find that camaraderie in anything that we do, we're going to be successful.
Mary Jane Beleza, 8 News Now.
The library also works to honor the contributions of veterans through dedicated plaques, flag installations, and storytelling campaigns. By sharing their stories, the library celebrates their impact on the community while working to preserve their legacy for future generations.
Deception is a great military tool. If you can fool the enemy about your intentions, about your location, if you can manipulate them to do what you want them to do, it's to your advantage.
Well, they called them the combat con artists. These soldiers used creativity and deception to defeat the enemy and save lives. We're bringing their story just ahead on Veterans Voices. Welcome back to our Veterans Voices special. I'm Jayla Washington. Hundreds of tanks, trucks, and soldiers, all made out of cloth, rubber, and lies. It's the work of a World War II unit known as the Ghost Army. They conducted deception missions, as they're called, starting right after D-Day until the end of the war. Nikki Burndine looks closer at how they helped bring victory to the Allies by fooling the enemy.
It sounds like something that belongs on the set of a movie.
Their mission was deception, and to carry it out, they used inflatable tanks and sound effects and illusion, impersonation, right on the battlefields of Europe.
Everything they did was to deceive the enemy while giving actual units time to move around.
Tanks crossing a small bridge.
They're known as the Ghost Army, a unit with about 1,100 soldiers that conducted 22 different deception missions, starting right after D-Day until the end of the war.
Deception is a great military tool. If you can fool the enemy about your intentions, about your location, if you can manipulate them to do what you want them to do, it's to your advantage. It can create surprise and help you out. So the Ghost Army, their mission was to impersonate other much larger American units.
These combat con artists had one goal, to save lives, but they did this with a bit of creativity.
So they had inflatable tanks and trucks and artillery and jeeps and inflatable spotter planes and anything. So they could set up a huge, presentation, if you will, on the battlefield.
They used sound deception.
They had sound trucks. These were half tracks with 500-pound speakers mounted on top that could play sounds that could go as far as 15 miles.
Radio deception.
So the enemy's listening in on the radio, and so you're sending phony radio messages and tying in with real radio networks.
And even special effects.
That involved physically impersonating the units that they're pretending to be. So they're going to put on phony shoulder patches to make it seem like they're in the 75th Infantry Division, let's say. They're going to set up fake headquarters, and they're going to have one of the guys be a fake general. I mean, I know it sounds made up, but this really happened and happened multiple times.
It sounds somewhat whimsical, but there were very real consequences.
And if you're going to understand the Ghost Army story, you want to enjoy the Hollywood aspects of it, the make-believe, the pretend, but you want to sober up pretty quickly to realize that there are people who are buried in cemeteries in Europe and in the United States who gave their lives to carry out this mission.
Rick Beyer runs the Ghost Army Legacy Project. His mission is to tell their stories.
It was all kept secret for 50 years or so after the war. This was a secret, and I got to tell you, there's still a lot of people who don't know very much about it at all.
These soldiers trained right here in Tennessee at Camp Forest. Today, there are just 3 living members of the Ghost Army left, and this year they were finally honored at the Capitol, 75 years after they served. Although it's impossible to know exactly how many lives these men saved, their impact is clear.
There have been estimates that maybe 15 to 30,000 lives, and there's no way to know, right? Is that accurate? I met a guy once who was a tanker under Patton, and he had never heard of this unit. I said, I think this unit might have saved my life, and because he'd been in one of the places where they operated. And that to me was really meaningful, because you can talk numbers and say thousands here, thousands there, but here was one guy, and he was showing me pictures of his children and grandchildren and saying, well, maybe they wouldn't even have been born if it hadn't been for this unit.
Absolutely incredible. That was Nikki Burdine reporting. Beyer wrote a book about the Ghost Army and produced a documentary. And there is so much information about the Ghost Army Legacy Project right now online. We have a link on our website. Just look for the story in the Veterans Voices section of KXAN.com. Well, that is our time for this special presentation. But remember, you can find more of our coverage online right now. We have a special section on our website. Again, just look for the Veterans Voices under the News tab at KXAN.com. It will take you to a page with stories from all across the country, detailing the stories of those who served our country. Thank you for joining us tonight for this special presentation. I'm Jayla Washington. Have a good night.